Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we're very fortunate once again to have with us a frequent guest on the Gaggle, Professor Mohammad Marandi from the University of Tehran, and he's fresh from his travails on Piers Morgan Unhinged or whatever the show is called.
Funny.
Um, and so, before we get on to the more substantive issues about the upcoming talks in Oman and what's going on generally in the Middle East. Perhaps you can tell us about what happened in that crazy, ridiculous show that you appeared on a day ago.
Well, as you can see, George, as you've seen, it's a bit different from crosstalk. Uh,
Thank you.
apparently they bring in people from the psychiatric hospitals in the United States and the UK so that they can check out and see if they can do a better job than the normal politicians.
Yeah,
Maybe they
I
can
had a
replace
feeling
them.
it was sponsored by some kind of pharmaceutical company. Yeah.
So the story, what basically I only do one-on-one on Piers Morgan. Whenever they invite me, I say one-on-one because I don't watch his show, but I know that they do this sort of thing, and they try to ambush people. This time, because of the circumstances, because of the negotiations on Saturday, I they asked me to come on the show, and I asked them who's invited, and they said there are three people besides myself. And I saw the names. I looked them up because I had no idea who those two crazy people were. And when I looked them up, it became clear that they were indeed crazy people. So I said, no, I'm not interested. And then they said, if we remove one of them, will you accept? And I said, okay, fine. Not only not only did they not do that, they allowed one of the guests to speak separately and have her own segment. So they wouldn't let me have a segment. It's our country that's being pressured by the United States. I'm confident about Iran's strength and capabilities. But anyway, not only did they give that person a separate segment, but they included both of them, contrary to what they told me, and this is all written in WhatsApp. And then they also brought in the former CIA chief, who had his own segment. And so the country that is being discussed is Iran. And you have one person from Iran, you have two people who are constantly preventing me from speaking. They dishonestly added the second person, and then they bring in the former CIA person, and that's basically it. As I was telling you before the show, I didn't want to do it. Now, in future, I'll only accept one-on-one with Piers Morgan. I just won't go on his show. But I think it showed a lot. I think it was very. I haven't watched it, but those who
You don't
have
have to.
said,
Don't waste your time. Okay.
yeah, it reveals what sort of crazy people in the United States and in the UK have influence over society,
Yeah.
and how the mainstream media, they either only speak with these people or people with similar beliefs but more sane. And in the case of Piers Morgan, which is an exception to the rule, where they bring other people around, they do it in a way in which it's managed so that the other really isn't allowed to explain his position or her position in a way which people would understand that the reality is not what they're being told. But I think it was done so unprofessionally,
Yeah.
this smear job or this ambush or whatever you'd like to call it.
Well,
It was done so unprofessionally.
it's such a disservice to the public because Piers Morgan is making the claim that he's bringing at least two different points of view. Usually on serious issues, there are more than two points of view. George and I are, I would say, on many issues on in one particular lane, but we our bumpers hit all of the time,
Yeah,
even in our own lane.
right.
Okay. And what Piers Morgan does is a huge disservice because he takes your position and turns it into a caricature that you can't even espouse or defend. And that's the dishonesty because he's not showing different points of view. He's reinforcing one point of view.
And what he does, which is where it's unprofessional, is that he allows this person continually to interrupt you. I mean, he's supposed to be the moderator, Piers Morgan, and he's not supposed to allow people just to interrupt immediately and to filibuster, which is what he was doing. So it was, yes, he brought you on, but he managed to make sure that you didn't actually get to speak because you were continually interrupted and filibustered against.
And then he accuses me of being the person who does not want others to speak. So, but anyone who watched it would know exactly what happened. So, at the beginning, I tried to get my points across, and then after half the show was finished, I just began laughing, and I thought,
Yeah.
well,
Well,
let them.
one last observation, and I've mentioned this to George in the past, is that another element of the dishonesty of that entire program and the people that put it together is that Piers Morgan may have some kind of mental defect because he has people. Let's take the case of the genocide in Gaza. Every time he brings up addresses it, he seems to have these. He's incapable of remembering anything that he's been told before. So he starts the program as it's today is October 7th, and I've seen him bring on people that I respect, explain to him what's going on, and he does the program again a day or two, a week or two again, and he starts all over from the very beginning, as if he's never heard of these arguments. It is so fundamentally dishonest.
Right, right, right.
Yes, and I on my first appearance on his show, I asked him to show the evidence of beheaded babies and show evidence of raped women, and he thought that this was an outrageous request, as if, God said that this had happened, so we shouldn't raise any more questions. And I told him on that show that in today's world where everyone has cell phones and there are cameras all over the place, and look at when in Syria when these ISIS and Al Qaeda people are slaughtering people, they're filming their own massacres and laughing and enjoying it. And Israel, which is a regime which has cameras all over the place, and it's a security state. So why don't they have any evidence? He couldn't answer back then. But for the last year and a half, we saw rape. We saw images from that prison where they raped that man. It's as if people like him, as you point out, he just the next day he doesn't remember anything about the previous day. We see all these slaughtered children, many of them beheaded, Palestinians. So it's as if it's not happening. So you're exactly right. For him, every day is October the 8th, 2023. It's like, what's that movie? Groundhog Day?
Groundhog Day, exactly. Every day is Groundhog Day. All right, so
every day is Groundhog.
So perhaps we can now move on to something a little more substantive than Piers Morgan. I mean, these talks that are scheduled for Saturday in Oman, and Trump, as is his wont, he sometimes sounds quite reasonable, as if he's ready to do a deal and that he's interested in the deal, and then he turns around and starts blustering about bombing and what a dangerous situation this is for Iran. So really, how do you see it? What do you think is likely to happen? And what are the different outcomes that you envisage?
Well, your guess is as good as mine, George. It's really unclear because for the reasons that you've just explained. Trump is not a person who is predictable. He's not a person who keeps his word. Look at the trade war and what's been going on over the past week or so. It's just like a madhouse in the United States. And even his own team they're constantly contradicting each other. So I don't know what's going to happen. I know that the Iranians are not going to negotiate uh, their support for their allies across the region. I know that the Iranians are not going to negotiate their uh, military capabilities, their conventional weapons, and their ability to use them. Um, Iran is willing to negotiate uh, with the United States and others directly and indirectly, in the case of the United States, indirectly for the time being, with regards to the nuclear program, but it's not going to uh, destroy its program or do what Libya did or anything like that. It's the Iranians are not going to even go back to 2015 because
Well,
after
that's
2015.
I wanted to ask you about that because um, with all the bluster aside, and we have to remember the last time Trump was speaking about this week, he had the Israeli prime minister sitting right next to him. But it seems to me that JCPOA, is there, with not calling it that, but is that a possibility? Because obviously denying Iran its sovereign rights of foreign policy of self-defense. I mean, this is absurd. Everybody knows it. But when if we have the IAEA involved, we have other agencies not calling it the JCPOA, but actually addressing it, because I think that's the only way out for the Trump administration.
The JCPOA, meaning an agreement where Iran and the P5+1 uh, have some sort of deal, is possible. But the text of the JCPOA for Iran is outdated because since then, Iran has made enormous advances, scientific advances, and infrastructural advances with regards to its peaceful nuclear program. And Iran is not going to go back. When the Iranians were negotiating 3 years ago, and I was there as a media advisor, just as I was in 2015, Dr. Bagheri, who was the head of the team, he negotiated a deal that was an improved JCPOA. In other words, there were two major elements that had to be taken into account. One was the advances that Iran made since the JCPOA, because if the Americans and the Europeans wanted the Iranians to go back to the technology that they had before, the Iranians would answer at the negotiating table, you sanctioned us since 2015, you imposed maximum pressure sanctions, you created huge damage to the economy, you pay us for the damage you cause, and we'll go back to 2015. But don't expect us to go back to 2015 when you will not compensate for the violations that were carried out after the deal was signed. And the second issue was that one of the major shortcomings of the 2015 deal, probably the major shortcoming, was that the American obligations, there was no mechanism to force the Americans to carry out their obligations, and there was no punishment for the Americans if they did not carry out their obligations. I mean, Iran could leave ultimately, but it would come at a political cost. So what Dr. Bagheri was doing 3 years ago is that they were devising a mechanism to protect a nuclear deal, and a JCPOA plus, let's say, where the first Americans would carry out their commitment, then the Iranians would respond. Then the Americans would carry out another one of their commitments, and then the Iranians would respond. So one of the problems that we had in 2015 was that the Iranians on day one, they began to implement everything. And then until the very end of the Rouhani government, the Iranians were never able to transact a single cent from using the central bank. So so the violations that, and this was before Trump, Obama was violating the nuclear deal. From day one, he violated the spirit of the deal, and then gradually he violated the deal itself. And so what Dr. Bagheri was doing 3 years ago was that they were busy negotiating a deal where the Americans, it would be more difficult and more costly for the Americans to violate the agreement. Now, I don't know what's going to happen on Saturday because one of the, as you know, we discussed at the beginning, one of the problems that anyone would have with Trump is stability, is a stability of thought, stability of mind. And Trump is someone who, you go to sleep at night and you wake up in the morning and you see he's, a new post has come out and the world has changed. And every time he takes credit for whatever happens, just like when the stock market crashed after that, and when we saw the bond market crash and all the money leaving the perhaps hundreds of billions of dollars that were just leaving the United States, he had to reverse course, but then he took credit for it again. So Trump is the sort of person who you don't know how to deal with. Even if you come to some sort of agreement, who's to say that he won't violate it or tear it up the next day? Just as we saw in Gaza, the ceasefire deal was his because the day before his inauguration, we were told that he imposed it on Netanyahu. Witkoff, we heard the story that Witkoff told him you have to, on Saturday, you have to sit down and get this done. We really don't know if all this is true, right. But that's what we've been told. And then literally a couple of weeks later, he's saying Palestinians have to leave Gaza. And that's just totally against the agreement. And then he gives the green light for the genocide to begin again. Again, a complete violation of the deal. So when Trump doesn't, in the past he said he wouldn't respect Obama's deal. And he hasn't respected other deals as well with regards to the, U.S.-Soviet Union ties and so on. But this is his deal. This is the one that, was supposed to make him a man that looked like a man of peace. So taking all that into consideration, I think the Iranian delegation will be very careful about negotiating anything.
But the way you outline the problems with the JCPOA, and it's very convincing. In other words, the Iranians would insist that, hey, you can't simply walk away yet again and essentially leave us high and dry and no real mechanism to us at least ensure that we can sell our oil and make a living. It's unlikely Trump is going to agree to that. So then what do you think the next step is? Because Trump has talked big, he's going to do this, bombing. What do you think will happen then?
I don't know, George. I don't know. If Trump is sane, if he's getting accurate information from the military, I'm sure they're telling him that you cannot win a war against Iran. If you look at the tweet put out by what's his name? I'm sorry, I just forgot his name all of a sudden. The gentleman who's who has his own, who was in Fox and before, and now he does his own
thing. Tucker Carlson.
Tucker, yes. Good God. Sorry about that. If you look at the tweet by Tucker Carlson, I would imagine has more access to real information than any other journalist in the United States today, because of the nature of his connections and because he's a bright and smart person. I may agree with some of the things he says, and I disagree with some of the other things that he says, especially when it comes to Trump. But he's a smart guy, and he has tremendous access because he, along with Musk, they were the two people, I think, who had the biggest impact on to help Trump during the campaign. There are many others, but I think these were two key people. He said in his tweet, Tucker, that the United States would lose a war with Iran. And I have no doubt about that. If the United States carries out a war against Iran, all these tiny dictatorships in the Persian Gulf region, their glass palaces, they will be destroyed because all of them host U.S. bases. They will be complicit. When there's war, it's war. how would Qatar survive a war? A country with a citizen, passport holding population of what, like 350,000 people, or the Emirates with like 1 million, 1.1 million passport holders, and the rest. So, and Iran has underground bases, drone and missile bases across the country, and they're deep underground, like what we see in Yemen, probably deeper and infinitely more extensive and more lethal. So if war breaks out, then Arabian Peninsula, there will be no more oil and gas. Not for a week or two. It's finished. And those regimes will all fall. They cannot last more than a couple of days or a couple of weeks at most under such circumstances. And then in Iraq, the American bases and assets, and they'll be overrun. And I don't think that, the Caucasus would do much better either. So that would lead to an economic catastrophe.
One of the things
And
that, one of the things that George and I have been observing, not necessarily agreeing on, but we've been talking about, is that and what does it mean to strike Iran? And one definition or one way of pursuing that is a aerial campaign to force regime change. That would probably include key infrastructure, also the nuclear infrastructure. But and it's something when you were last on my program, I chimed in. You were talking about the stereotype about Iran, and I said, "Yeah, I've heard this before. That's how they talk about Russia all of the time. All you have to do is kick in the door,
China,
and their roof will
and
fall."
China, Peter, Vance just a few days ago,
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard him say, call the Chinese peasants. I mean, I've been to China. If you compare China and the United States, the peasants are not in China. I have no doubt.
Right.
But I mean, address this belief, and I think it comes from the Israelis that see, look, Damascus, it fell. It was a house of cards. Iran is no different. I think that's what they're telling Trump. Maybe
Yeah,
not his
that's quite
military,
possible.
but the politicians.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's going on. I would imagine that the military are saying one thing and then the Zionist lobby is saying something else. Like the two nutcases that I was on that Piers Morgan show, who obviously are just living in their alternative universe. That's how it is in among the political elites in the United States. I mean, Peter, why do you think we have this crisis with tariffs? I have no doubt that the people around Trump said, we're number one, we're America, we always win. And they just didn't, they're just not sophisticated people. And then they obviously did not even think about the bond market and all the other issues that are too complicated for me to properly comprehend. But things were just falling apart in front of them. And when Trump turned and reversed course, people in his own team didn't know that he had made that decision. And I think it's the same problem. In the case of Iran, I think the Zionist lobby and these madmen and women, they're telling Trump, yeah, we just, the regime is unpopular, people hate it, it's falling apart, it's a despotic regime, they cannot manage themselves, and so on. And on the other hand, the military is saying, look, Mr. President, uh, and then Tucker Carlson's tweet. That's probably what the real people who know what they're talking about are saying to Trump, what Tucker Carlson tweeted. So and again, the three of us are old enough to remember. I mean, some of your audience, I don't know what their age group is, but some don't. But if the Americans want to invade Iran, they would have to put in much more effort than Desert Storm. And Desert Storm, I think there were like almost 600,000 American soldiers. They had a huge coalition. The Saudis were paying for it. The American and the United States, it took months to bring in all those troops. Iraq back then was much weaker than Iran.
Mhm.
Iran now has access to very high-tech capabilities, indigenous. I mean, the Americans claim that that Iranian drones and the Europeans claim that Iranian drones are creating immense damage in Ukraine. I don't know, but if we trust their judgment, then they should recognize that this is not Saddam Hussein, and this is not Iraq, or this is not Afghanistan, this is not Libya, this is not even Vietnam. And if anyone looks at the map, the Persian Gulf, one side of it belongs to Iran. So, the Iraqis only had access to a very tiny portion, a tiny part of the Persian Gulf in the northern part of the Persian Gulf. The Iranians have one side of it. That's why it's called the Persian Gulf. And so it's not very wide. If Iran can fire 200 missiles, almost 200 missiles at Israel, and the Israelis couldn't do anything about it, Iran can fire hundreds of thousands of missiles and hundreds of thousands of drones at American bases and American assets and their allies across the region, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. So that would be the worst case scenario. But what I would imagine is an air campaign. But I'm sure that countries in the Persian Gulf, even though they're complicit in Yemen, Qatar is helping the Americans bomb Yemen, the Emirates is helping them, the Saudis are helping them, and even US bases in Turkey are a part of this. So all of these countries, including those who pretend to be on the side of the Palestinians, like Qatar and Turkey, all of them are allies of the United States. They're in the American camp. I find it really funny, strange that some people say that no, Mr. Erdogan is really supporting the Palestinians, but he's fooling the Americans. They really say this.
I know.
And there's something I should also point out. For years, these deeply sectarian people, and this sectarianism actually comes from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all these, and now Turkey, sadly, and it's heavily funded sectarianism. It's something that the Americans want because they want to fragment the region and so on. And so these people have always attacked Shia and Iran to try to create divide between Shia and Sunni and Christian and Muslim, and that's how empire works. So they would say the Iranians have a different Quran, or the Iranians do taqiyya. And taqiyya is when a person whose life is threatened, let's say a person in Syria who one of these ISIS and Al-Qaeda thugs comes up to him or her and says, "Are you a Alawite? Are you a Druze? Are you a Christian?" He says, "No, I'm not." That's taqiyya. That's when you hide your belief so that they don't kill you. So these sectarian extremists, they went, and this is in the Quran, by the way. But anyway, so it's it's religious. It's part of the religion condones it, allows it. So these people say no, the Shias believe in taqiyya. That's because they believe in hypocrisy. They are liars. They lie about everything. Their real agenda is different from what they say in public. The Shia are just, and this is something that you see on TV stations and websites and Telegram channels funded by these regimes, by Qatar, by Turkey, by Saudi Arabia, and so on. Especially during the height of the Syrian dirty war. Now you see that these supporters of Qatar, these supporters of Erdogan, say, no, you misread everything. Erdogan is fooling the Americans. He wants them to think he's their ally, but he's undermining the Israeli regime. And so that's so you're basically saying that he's a liar and hiding his true intentions.
But let me just ask, if you think it's, you want to finish the point?
Yeah, so they distort something that's condoned not just by religion but logically, and distort it to make Iran look like a devious and hypocritical, not just a government, but the people, all Shias, in order to create hatred between Shias and Sunnis. And then these same people today who are selling oil to Netanyahu, who are doing trade, Turkish Airways has direct flights to Israel, Qatar, ally of the United States, buying American jets, drones, and so on. These people are now doing, these regimes are, according to their supporters, are now doing what they accuse Iran of doing, being hypocrites and being and hiding their true intention. I don't know if I got my point, if I explained it accurately.
But do you really think, though, that the U.S., if it does launch a bombing campaign against Iran, do you think it will use its bases in the Persian Gulf rather than using its basic aircraft carriers? Diego Garcia, do you really think they're going to use their bases in the Gulf?
I don't think so, because if they do that, those regimes will be destroyed, and it will not be difficult for Iran at all. And if you destroy their gas installations or their infrastructure, they're gone. It's like it's not even difficult for Iran to do that. They are no they don't have any defense. I mean, the Saudis, when they fought, when they carried out a 7-year genocidal war against Ansarullah with the support of everyone, and including Qatar and Turkey, by the way, until their differences grew, and then they imposed a siege on Qatar, and then Qatar and Turkey tilted away from them. They had the whole world behind them. They were so incompetent that they lost. At the end, when the Qatari missile and drone capabilities grew roughly 3 years ago, I think, they began to strike Saudi oil installations, and the Saudis said, "Please, let's have a ceasefire." So
Aramco, yeah.
after Aramco, it got worse because
Yeah.
their capabilities became more extensive, and the Saudis said, "Okay, enough is enough." So if there is war, all of these regimes will be gone, and it will be catastrophic for the Americans. It
Well,
will be. I mean, look, war is catastrophic for everyone.
of
I'm
course.
not saying that it will be a catastrophe for everyone, but the Americans would definitely lose the war, and
But
these regimes would fall. So I don't think they'll use their airspace.
I'm just trying to understand the stratagem here, and maybe it's something you can't we can't comprehend because Trump is involved here, and the Israeli lobby and the Zionist lobby in the West in general. Is someone telling? And I'm not expecting you to know the answer, but I'm speculating. Um, the Iranian leadership, they're on very, very thin ice. They can be intimidated. Just do the madman thing. Just we're gonna bomb you to smithereens. You look like a moonscape, and and then I try to be charitable to Mr. Witkoff. Okay, I mean I don't think I'd like his job. Okay, how do you explain to a guy that knows nothing about what he's getting himself involved in, and you just tell him, just scare the shit out of them, and they'll fold like a tent, okay? That's the only way I can understand this because we saw in the press approach with Trump and Netanyahu. I mean that their what they said to the press will go down in history as an example of someone that is completely illiterate historically, and maybe devoid of any kind of moral compass. And sitting next to him was a pathological liar. If the information is so compact and so funneled that Trump actually may believe all these things, and that's what terrifies me because what does he do? I guess yeah, he saw the bond rates go skyrocket, and so how do you translate to him and say this is not working out the way we thought? What's our plan B? And I'm worried that he'll say, well, what do you mean plan B? We win or we don't win?
No, we win because he doesn't have a comprehension of not winning, perhaps. So that's another problem. As you said, I don't know the answer. Witkoff himself is when I watched parts of the Witkoff interview with Tucker Carlson, and Witkoff himself is dishonest. He blamed Hamas for the breakdown of the ceasefire. He knows that he's lying. He knows that everything that Trump has said about removing Palestinians from Gaza violates the third phase of the ceasefire. It makes it complete nonsense. So, for me, if I was on the Iranian side, I'd be saying, our problems are that the guy sitting in the guy. Well, they're not direct negotiations, but Wickoff himself is not credible either, based upon the past experiences. But and there are people in Iran who are intimidated, but it's complex. First of all, one of the things that helps Iran is that Trump is so unpopular and he's so widely despised and he's seen as so, crazy, basically, that ordinary people in Iran are saying, how can we even have a deal with this entity? So that strengthens the Iranian position. The second is a group of people who are intimidated, who are saying, oh my God, what's going to happen? But they have no solution because it's Trump. The third set of people are the people who are saying, well, if we have to fight, we'll fight. If we can find a solution, I mean, then the negotiations need to take place, the indirect negotiations, because our allies have to see that we are doing what we can to prevent violence, to do what we can to prevent instability, and for the global markets to remain stable. We need to show that to the Indians, the Kenyans, the South Africans,
The
the
Russians.
Chinese, the Russians, everyone. We need to show all of our friends and allies, the Brazilians, anyone, or those who are just minding their own business in a different part of the world, who's they don't have all that many interests in this part of the world. They too need to know that look, Iran is doing what can be done. But ultimately, I have no doubt that the United States will be confronted with reality, and that is that the Iranians will not give up their sovereignty. And the United States is not in a position to fight a war with Iran and win. So what happens next? I don't know. But there's one big advantage for Iran. And don't misunderstand me, George. Don't misunderstand me, Peter. I hate war. You both know I fought in war. I've gone to Syria many times. I went to Iraq when they liberated Mosul. I went to Lebanon as soon as the Israelis began bombing. I was there when Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was martyred, because I feel like you two that I have to play my role. I have an obligation as a human being to help create awareness. So I hate war, but the fact that the United States, in its arrogance, or for a host of reasons, which the two of you have discussed often, and I don't want to get into that, they failed to end the war in Ukraine so far. The fact that they initiated a trade war, not just with China, but with the rest of the world, but China in particular, and have made China change overnight. You both know this, your audience may not, and many of them may know this. China is like a super tanker. It doesn't change policy like Russia or Iran. It is very slow. And now, after what's happened, what Trump came back, the language that you see coming from Beijing, or the immediate response to the tariffs, this is not something that they would do before. We recall 8 years ago, 7 years ago, Trump won, how it played out. The Chinese took some hits even, they didn't respond, and then they were slow, and then when they did respond, they were seeking a way out. Now they're saying we'll fight till the end, and they it's like the super tanker suddenly magically changed direction. And this, I think, helps Iran, because the United States has now isolated itself. It's fighting multiple battles on multiple fronts. It helps Russia too, and it helps China as well, because the fact that the United States, Trump, is fighting on so many different fronts makes it more difficult with Iran, makes it more difficult with Russia, and makes it more difficult with China. So even for China, which has entered the battle, even though it's a bloodless battle so far, thank God. But they've entered, the fact that they've entered this battle changes the equation for everyone else. And of course, Trump in his stupidity targeted the rest of the world as well, and that is going to change things. He may get concessions from here and there, but no one is ever going to trust the United States again, and no one is, at least for many years. No one trusts Trump
but
anymore.
let's if we think in terms of let's say there is a bombing campaign, and you said I don't know what happens then. Is there a likelihood of Iran essentially not retaliating militarily, just let things go, and just announcing that they will withdraw from the non-proliferation treaty? They say that's it. We're done. This is an unfair, unprovoked attack. We hadn't done anything wrong, and that's it. We're withdrawing from the non-proliferation treaty. Is that a likely possibility?
I think that there will be a major military response, much bigger than the American attack. First of all, Iran has very sophisticated air defense capabilities, and I'm sure over the past few months they've been working very swiftly to strengthen them. Iran's offensive capabilities are much greater. So the leader has already said twice, I think, that Iran will strike harder than whatever the Americans do. And then there's no doubt that Iran will leave the NPT. The previous Speaker of Parliament went on television just a couple of weeks ago, and I tweeted his interview, or that small part of the interview, and he said that we'll make a nuclear weapon. He didn't say we'll just leave. He didn't say anything about leaving. We will definitely leave the NPT, but he said if our nuclear sites are bombed, we will make a nuclear weapon. And the irony is that Trump has pushed us to do this. I mean, if Trump had not torn up the JCPOA, and I'm not a big fan of the JCPOA, by the way. I think that the Iranians gave too many concessions in 2015. But whoever came to power in Iran afterwards said we must implement the deal because we signed it. It doesn't matter who did it. This is the country. They did it in the name of Iran. So the next president, like Dr. Raisi, he never said, okay, we're going to tear up the nuclear deal. He said, no, it's a commitment that the Iranians made. But if we're going to negotiate again, we have to, it has to be a JCPOA too. So everyone in Iran, says that when Iran signs something, whoever signs it, it's on behalf of the country, whether we like it or not. But now what will happen is that there will be a counterstrike. The American jets, probably some of them will be downed unless they fire missiles from very far away, which won't do the trick. And by the way, all these underground facilities are very deep underground. The Iranians have thought about that. Just look at Yemen. The Americans said we're going to come in and destroy all those underground facilities. Did they? No. The Yemenis are firing their missiles and drones. Why? Because they planned this years ago. And the Iranians have put a lot more effort and funding. They're much richer than Yemen. It's a much bigger country. And Iranian, its technology is far more advanced.
To kind of follow up on George's question, because I think it really, let's say, for example, there is a bombing campaign against Iran, and to follow up from George, you said there would be a massive reaction. I would posit this. I would surmise that Iran would react with great lethal force, but to the point where it sends the message, we have come as far as you on the escalation ladder. Do you want to go further? It's up to you. And I think that would give great pause because, first of all, a bombing campaign is not going to force regime change. We all know that. It will only anger the Iranian people, and everyone will gather around the flag. Obviously, as George has mentioned in previous podcasts, you will have terrorist attacks. You'll have foreign infiltration. Assassinate. It's going to be, we're in the ugly category here. My point is that Iran is going to have to teach the Americans is that we can go as far as you, but all of us can go further. It's up to you. And I think that would give great pause because I think Trump thinks this is like a Netflix series, where it's 1-2 punch, we win. There's no scenario in which that's going to happen. Your thoughts?
Yes, and I think that's what the Ayatollah Khamenei meant when he said that we will hit back harder. He didn't say if they hit us, we're going to destroy everything. He said we'll hit back harder, and that's basically going to send a message to the United States that do you really want to do this? Iran has been preparing itself for 2 decades, and again, Iran doesn't want war. Iran doesn't want instability. And the real problem is not the nuclear program. Both of you and I know the real problem
Yes.
is the Israeli regime. The reason why they despise Iran so much is because Iran is opposed to the regime. It says that this regime is morally illegitimate, and I think now the majority of people across the world agree with Iran, and even the mood in the United States, despite the mass media and all, is changing, as we saw in the recent polls, how 53% of Americans, if I'm not mistaken, disapprove of the U.S.
And a sizable number of Republicans as well.
Those who support Israel are largely older people.
Yep.
And, 10 years down the road, a lot of those older people are not going to be around. And the younger people who are witnessing the atrocities, they will still be, they'll still be alive and working, and they'll be a part of society. So things are not good for the regime. But the whole point of this antagonism is Israel. It's not about the nuclear program. It's not about human rights. It's not about global warming. It's not about terrorism. It's all about the Israeli.
What was the Piers Morgan woman? It's about gender apartheid. Is that what she said?
Yeah. I haven't heard that expression. Yeah,
I hadn't heard that expression either.
And her name is not even Persian. It's like I don't know, it's a French name or whatever. That's just how it is. The thing is that the West is not going to change the political establishment. And ultimately, the only way to force it to back down is through resistance. Now, whether you call what China did in its own way resistance, what Russia did in its own way resistance, and of course what Iran calls resistance, that's the only way to push back, and to push back hard. And now the world is at a place where the West is in a very tight spot, and it has someone in charge who I think cannot transition the United States from, and the irony is that his Secretary of State admitted that we live in a multipolar world now. He says this, but he does not really believe it, and they cannot transition from this what used to be a unipolar moment to this multipolar world. And Trump obviously is not, at least shows no sign that he is capable of doing that. The arrogance in the way in which he speaks with Iran is only going to create hostility.
I might surprise both of you, but when Trump started his trade war against the world, George and I have talked extensively about the impact within the United States. But when it first started, I thought the only beneficiary were the BRICS. And George knows I've always been a little bit skeptical of the whole BRICS agenda. It doesn't have it's more in the idea area than in practice. But BRICS is a lot about trade, okay? And I think that was one of my first responses, is that this is something that will give the BRICS movement a little bit more traction, because they're not interested in a military alliance. It's not it's not a security alliance. It's about economics and trade. And I think that that's going to give an impetus to say, we have to deal with people that are predictable and rational and believe in a win-win. And I'm not trying to mimic the Chinese, but where everyone benefits from it. And I think that Trump's machinations with dealing with the world, I've made it clear to people I'm not an anti-tariff guy. I'm just not this approach. This is not the approach that I think is appropriate.
Yeah, I believe in tariffs. I don't believe in this madness, and I agree with you. BRICS is not what some people think it is, at least so far. But it is a platform where these people talk together and try to figure out how to circumvent Western financial institutions and the U.S. dollar in order to improve their trade relationships and in order to improve the lives of their own people. Whether it's BRICS or whether it's ASEAN or any other regional organization, all of them are going to be talking about the problem of the United States now. Whether it's Latin America or Southeast Asia or a global grouping or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a more security-oriented organization, which but it will start. These people, when they talk, sit together, they will be saying, "What do we do about this guy or the United States?" So it's going to have a huge impact. I actually think that what happened is good for the world, even though I'm sure a lot of people are going to suffer as a result. And by the way, one of the countries who benefits from the trade war is Iran, because Iran is sanctioned. How the only thing that will happen is the price of oil will go down because the global economy will slow down. That will have an impact on Iran. But beyond that, uh, Iran is sanctioned, so uh, it limits the damage that it does to the Iranian economy. And in
And to
fact,
Russia. Russia and Iran are in the same
and
situation.
Russia and all sanctioned countries, Iran and Russia in particular. But I would also add that it has created a greater incentive for China to move closer to Iran. Now, the Iranian-Russian relationship was improved ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. And it improved, but it never reached where anywhere near what it is today until Ukraine. And then because the Russians were wary about working too much with Iran because of the West, because of sanctions. Then the mood changed in Russia, so the relationship improved dramatically. The trade war with the United States has already shifted the mood among Chinese elites about their relationship with Iran. Iran, over the last few days, I've been in contact with my Chinese colleagues have been in contact with me, saying that the Chinese government is more determined than ever before. And why is that the case? Because of the United States. Because the United States, when you sanction a country or you tariff the country to death, or well, at a maximum tariffs, then you no longer have any leverage. Once I've, once Trump imposes maximum pressure sanctions on Iran, he can keep, they still keep sanctioning people, but you can sanction, someone can sanction the three of us, and then they can sanction us again, and then again, and it doesn't make a difference. We're sanctioned. So now that China, its overlapping interests with the United States have decreased, then they are more capable of establishing closer ties with Iran and Russia as well. And the case was true between Iran and Russia too. So the United States is not only isolating itself, but it is constantly pushing different countries towards one another to create this block of resistance that is ultimately much more powerful than the West. We're not living. I mean, when I was a kid, I can say that I became aware of the world more or less in the 1970s. I was born in 1966, but my parents have always been politically active. So in the 70s, I was growing up and I saw, began seeing the United States was what China is today. Manhattan Island was Shanghai, but that's gone. That United States no longer exists. It is not the hyperpower of the 1990s or the beginning of this, the 2000 to 2000 and let's say five. That era is finished. the United States, I mean, the decline began far before, and the two of you know this better than I. But the point is that, relatively speaking, even in the 1970s, their power was much different from what it is today. But they don't recognize this. The elites in the United States are living in their bubble, and they think that nothing has changed. Everything has changed. U.S. infrastructure falling apart, the country becoming increasingly impoverished, the middle class fallen apart. Corona made things worse. The financial crisis, of course, now the endless wars, and now Ukraine, and then the crisis of morality with regards to Palestine, and how the world views the United States. We're living in a different era. The United States neither has the soft power nor the hard power, and now we've seen in the trade war the economic power to impose its will on the rest of the world. So they are basically they're being a catalyst to this process. They are speeding the pace of their own decline.
But I would posit, as we're finishing up here, that's what makes the United States more dangerous now than ever before, because hegemons don't say, "Hey, I'm going to go into retirement." It doesn't happen that way.
No. And that's why I don't know what's going to happen. And that's why I say I don't know what's going to happen. But what I can say is that the United States is going downhill, and the United States cannot defeat Iran. It cannot defeat Russia, and it cannot defeat China, and it cannot defeat the global majority. But the United States is full of mad people. I mean, not the whole population, but the political elites are like those two people I was on with, Piers Morgan. If your audience just watches that show, they'll see that the insanity among political elites in the United States is very dangerous. But we have to be steadfast. We cannot appease these people, because the problem is that if you appease them, they're not going to say, "Okay, thank you very much, and now we can be friends." They'll go on to the next phase. They'll say, "Okay, now you have to give more and more and more."
Libya.
NATO advancing eastwards. Everything, whether it's Iran, China, Russia, anyone. That's the nature of this arrogant empire. So Iran will be flexible with regards to the nuclear program within a framework, like we saw 3 years ago. But beyond that, if the Americans think that they can get concessions from Iran, Iran would be forced to appease them, they're miscalculating.
Well, I think that's right. I think that's the correct assessment. So thank you so much. Thank you really for giving us your time, and thank you as always for your really, really interesting, fascinating insights. And look forward to having you back soon to discuss what happened in these nuclear talks. So thank you, Professor Marandi. Thank you, Peter. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.